This one here, if you do want to use it, is a pulse, about 4 pulses. So and it doesn't work. Basically, that's your 2 types of welder. That's a MIG welder, metal inert gas, and that's a TIG welder. I think it's tungsten inert gas. Right, your basic MIG welder, single phase, 240, just straight plug in. Unless you get a really big machine, they'll just work off a normal mains power, that's fine. That's your welding material that comes out the end of the gun, yeah?
Yep.
On that spool. So your wire is clamped in between those 2 there. You've got 2 different grooves on there. You get 0.6 and 0.8 wire, but they also go up to 1 mil. You know, look, 0.6, 0.8, 1 mil, 1.5, 2, goes all the way up to 4 mil wire.
And why would you have different?
So doing a heavier grade weld.
Okay.
You know, if you want to weld an industrial beam up,
yeah,
then you want a lot more power and a lot more material coming out the end of the gun, and a lot more filler material or weld material.
So you'd need more power for the thicker.
The thicker you go, the more power you need.
Okay.
So that runs through there. When you press that button, you trigger. Yeah. So that's your wire feed, but obviously I haven't got the clamp down, so it's not feeding through. So you push that down. Feel it click the wire into the groove, pull that up, that's your wire tension on there, so you can wind that up and down on your clamp tension.
Yep.
Okay, so when you press that now, it's feeding wire off the drum through your welding torch, which is flexible obviously, but you can get new liners for them, and that's feeding your wire out at a given rate, which is controlled by your wire speed here. So that's on its lowest, look. Hardly doing anything, wind it up a little bit more. Coming out very slowly.
Yeah.
Round to number 10.
Yeah.
Yeah? So that controls your wire speed. This one here, if you do want to use it, is a pulse.
So how do you decide on the grade of wire?
Sheet metal work, you want 0.6 or 0.8. This will weld, for a structural weld, you'll probably weld up to about 1/4 inch thick with it. Anything bigger than that, you probably want to go up your wire size.
Is there a guide you can go to?
Yeah, I mean, just go on any sort of forum at all. On here you've got thickness of material, look, so you've got 0.6 of a mil, so 0.8 of a mil is, or say a millimetre sheet, yeah? Which is your average sort of size sheet you're going to get. So your wire thickness on that one, look, you can go 1 mil, 0.8, 0.6.
Yeah.
Your feed rate, which is on your screw there, 1 to 10, which we showed you, yeah? So 1 mil, you can go number 4, 3.5 or 3. So the thinner the material, the thinner the wire, the faster the feed speed. When you think about it, you need to plumb more wire in, yeah?
Yeah.
That's your power rating, which we haven't done yet. That's this switch here. So that goes from 1 all the way around to 8. That's how many amps and how much current's coming out the end of the cable. So on a 1 mil, you can go 3, 4 or 4. And that's using what they call Fe argon mix. That's your gas type, yeah? So then you've got different gas types all the way along, and that's telling you what to use with it.
And the gas type, what's the difference in gas types?
Well, generally what material you're welding. You get what they call a mix. That I've got neat argon in there at the moment because I had to take the bottle off of this. So that's like weld A, look, weld argon. One of these. But that's called weld argon mix. Normal steel welding, you use your mix. Pure argon, you use more on the TIG for welding aluminium. Right, so that's basically, that'll give you a guideline of how to set it up.
Yeah.
but obviously after doing it for donkey's years, you get in here, you can tell what's right and what's wrong. Yeah. The only other thing you need to set is your gas flow rate, which I've got it set up high because it's often got the door open, it's windy, but you set it about between 8 and 10 normally. That's your flow, how much gas is coming out the end of the gun. And when you press that, gas comes out of those holes there through the torch, yeah. So you've not only got the wire, you've got wire speed feed, you've got electric current coming through that wire, and you've got gas coming out of there. If you undo that, look, see that? Wire speed, that's your wire feed through there, yeah? That's your gas feed, that's your positive and negative, or the switched gear for the electronics to turn on or off. So that'll only go in one way. All the torches, all the fittings, I think, unless you get onto a really big welder, all these torch fittings are all exactly the same. Okay. So you put your pins in, that threads in and holds that. This one's old and tired, so that should be connected in there to stop that bending. Like, the only other thing you can change is your nozzle size, obviously for different thickness wires.
Yeah.
So you get 0.6, 0.8, I don't know what that one is, but this needs a new. All these guns, you can change what they call the liner in them. You can pull that off, pull that end out, and you can strip all the liner out the inside and put a new liner in it, just to make the gun run smoother. Yeah. Which this could do with, because it's donkey's years old, but I'm used to it now. So.
How often would you normally do that then?
Oh, not that often. You know, I mean, if you're using them all day long, every day, then you'd have to do it fairly often.
As in, like, annually, or?
No, more than that, probably.
Okay.
Normally, what you do is get them serviced. You have a Murex engineer or a welding engineer to come around and service the welder. You can get different tips for all sorts. Wider gas, smaller gas. I haven't got any to fit this, but when you get into them all, these are all for bigger welders that we cleared out a garage on. But these are all different sizes. You can get some that have got 2 prongs on for welding. Oh, there you go. So you can rest that against your material and weld like that. There's hundreds of different fittings and shit you can get for them. That's all different tips. See, they're smaller ones. That's, you can get what they call a spool welder, spool gun. So you have all your power coming through, yeah. But on the top of the gun there's a spool, and that feeds your wire down through there. Yeah, there's all different types of welding. This is just a basic MIG welder. I mean, I'm no professional welder by any way or means. When you get into welding, people really know what they're doing. Yeah. You know, whereas I'm just using it for welding up cars. Your power coming through there, your wire speed feed coming through there, your gas coming through there. Yeah. If you don't have that gas shield around the weld, it just bubbles up. It needs to be shielded from the atmosphere, yeah. Which is what your inert gas is for. That's your earth clamp, that's the piece you want to weld.
Why do you need to earth it?
Because basically you've got power coming out of that. It's like a switch.
Okay.
If that's just hitting something without the other side of the welder on it, it's not going to work.
So what would happen without earthing it?
Nothing, it won't weld.
What, the wire would just come out?
The wire will come out, the gas will come out, it won't do anything. Okay. It just won't weld anything because it's not shorting back through to make a circuit. Okay. So you need that on your workpiece to make a circuit, yeah? Yeah. So that basically is the basics. Basically is the basics of a MIG welder. TIG welder, completely different beast. Again, you've got your earth, which is normal. So that's your workpiece. Now this, again, is a basic TIG welder. Right, so you've got gas coming through your tube again. Yeah. And you've got power going to what's called a tungsten. So they're all different tungstens. Different sizes, different thicknesses, different materials, yeah? So you've got red, which I can't remember which ones they are. You've got white, you've got black. There's probably 20 different types of tungsten, maybe more. One's for welding sheet, one will be for welding aluminium. They're called, I can't remember which way around, it's thoriated and zirconated, the two you're going to use the most of realistically.
Okay.
Till you get onto weird materials. Right, so that's your basic torch head, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so you've got power coming out through that. So these are collet holders. Right, you've got 3.2 millimeters, 16th, which is 1.6 mil. So you've got 1.6, 2.4, 3.2 normally. That's a 1.6, 2.4 in the middle, another 2.4. So then they're your collet holders, and you've got a collet, which are these, yeah? So that's a 2.4, so that will fit in that, like that. That's another 2.4, so that's a 1.6, and that'll be a 3.2. No, it's another 2.4, I lied. So basically that's your 3 different sizes I'm going to use. If you get up into sort of big boys like this, then you'll need a bigger gun than that, and what they also call a water-cooled gun. So you have water cooling running through the head of the gun.
Okay.
Which you're not going to use for anything that we do here realistically. That's generally more for welding aluminium, which has a lot of heat sink in it. You need to get the material hot before you can weld it. This is almost instant heat.
Yeah.
So then obviously smaller, that's a 1.6 tungsten. That is a 3.2 tungsten, so it'll fit through that hole. Yeah. But I mean realistically, this sort of stuff we do here, you're never going to get up to that sort of size, and that's a 2.4 tungsten. So that will fit in that one, that will fit in that one, that will fit in that one. So we need a 1.6 for that. 2.4. Okay, and then I won't worry about the bigger sizes at the moment, because you're not going to go above that doing car work.
Yeah.
Alright, so the way it works is you screw, say you're doing a 1.6, you put that in that end, your collet goes in there, in the back, you pass your rod through. Now because you've got a long tungsten on, you want a long tail. Put your tail in. You don't do it up tight yet, because that lets you move that tungsten in and out, yeah? And you have your shroud, the cap on there, and then your gas shroud on there. So instead of having wire coming through and feeding out the end as your filler material,
Yeah.
this doesn't have it at all. All this does is form an arc that you can weld into with a filler rod. They're all different types of welding rod, from 2.4 down to probably 0.5 millimeter, and all different materials. You've got aluminium, tungsten, mild steel, and there's, I mean, if you get into it, the aluminium grades, there's so many different grades of aluminium welding rods, it's ridiculous, you know. You can go on forever and ever and ever talking about that, but unless you realistically really know what material you're welding,
Yeah.
just a general rod will do it.
So it can get very specific then.
Yeah, seriously specific. Like I say, there's so many different grades of aluminium. Say you were welding that in aluminium, you need to find out what, if it's a real structural weld, or it needs to be very, very strong, or very, very nice and neat and tidy, you need to know what that material is. Then you can go on a chart and it'll tell you what rods to use with that chart.
So the difference in the grade could be just the finish of...
Can just be the finish, but generally it's strength.
Okay.
Generally it's strength. And what you'll find, if you try to weld magnesium with a normal aluminium rod, it just ain't going to happen.
Right.
It'll just blow it all over the place. It won't happen. If you're doing something very specific, you need to know what your material is.
Yeah.
What grade of material. Holding your MIG gun on your workpiece, which you hold away from it, and the wire coming out the end, that's your filler.
Yeah.
This one, your TIG welder, I mean that's extended too long just to show. That'd be your workpiece down there.
Yeah.
And as your arc comes off of this, and forms a weld pool on your workpiece, you feed the filler rod in as you go in. Yeah, so it's not coming out the end of the gun. MIG welding's a one-handed operation, TIG welding's two-handed.
Yeah.
So gas comes out the end, power comes out the end, but it just forms a weld pool as such. Yeah.
When you say weld pool, I mean, is that like just a spot of heat?
It's a spot of heat that makes that area molten, soft enough to feed that into. Otherwise, you're just hitting that on a lump of metal.
Yeah.
You need it soft.
How does that affect the metal, like the steel that you're actually welding onto?
Molecularly wise, it will alter it, but that's why you use, if you're doing it serious welding, you use the right rods.
Yeah.
And it just bonds everything back together again. So that's your basics of it. Obviously, you can go again up with size the more power you want to use, down with size the less power you want to use. So you go from a 1/16 rod to a 2.4 to a 3.2. I mean, there's in that lot, you see that big one there, that's a 1/4 inch, but you'll get up to like 400 amps with that. That's for stupid, I mean, like serious shit. Basic steel welding on the MIG welder, it's all just MIG wire. You can run stainless wire on them and run stainless MIG, but the TIG welder is much more technical for types of material, types of rod, types of tungsten. But again, you can make it as simple or as hard as you like. You try and weld a bit of, I don't know, super duper silver steel with one of those tungstens and one of them rods, it will weld it, you hit it with a hammer and it will fall apart. So you've got to match, when it gets onto specialist welding, you've got to match your material to your tungsten, your gas and your rod, whereas a MIG welder will just blast steel out all day long.
Okay.
Now your tungstens, you have to grind, if you're welding steel, you want to grind a tip on it, a fine point. You can do them on the side of a grinder going that way, which isn't good. What you should do, if you're doing them properly, is get a tungsten grinder.
Okay.
You feed it in the end and the wheel goes that way.
It's like a pencil sharpener, is it?
Sort of, yeah. But for the sort of welding we're doing, again, it's not, for me, it's not that critical.
Why would you need to...
What it is, it's to do with the arc as it comes down the end. If you don't grind it the right way, it fires off at angles. So you should be able to pick that up and do what they call a fusion weld on one of those that's literally as wide as your thumbnail.
Right.
Just a line along. But if it isn't ground, you know, this is if you're talking super duper welding.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
If it isn't ground the right way, then the arc can come off at different angles instead of straight out the end. So that's just grinding them, and then what you'll find is they can see that? That's blown the end, that's got furring on it, so it's blown the end off. So what you do, basically they will last, that's why you have a long tail and a short tail on the back of the gun. So you get yourself a hammer, put it on the edge of something sharp, and just, the end will just tap off. That's that, and then I grind them on here. That isn't the way to grind a tungsten, by the way.
Yeah.
What you realistically should do is, with it spinning that way on the face, and turn them like that. But if that catches on there, it'll come straight back and smack you in the face, so I don't do them like that.
Yeah.
But realistically, get yourself, if you want to do proper welding, you need to get what they call a tungsten grinder. You've got alternating current, direct current, TIG welding, arc welding, 2T and 4T we won't get into. Right, you can run it, most TIG welders, you either, that's on, off, yeah?
Yeah.
Now, you can set it with a ramp up, so you've got a background pulse, a downslope, frequency of pulse, but that's more to do with your HF if you're welding aluminium.
Yeah.
So you've got what they call a normal weld, flatline weld, look. So that, because this isn't plugged in, look, that would be your normal switch gear, goes in there.
Yeah.
But we are running a foot pedal. So we've got a foot pedal to fire it instead of that. You can get these with a wheel on them. So you press it down and you can wind your power up and down.
Okay.
They're quite awkward to use. I have used them before, but this is your foot pedal. So you don't use that for powering up.
Yeah.
So you just put your foot on the pedal. That'll start it. Yeah. Just clicking it on, and then the further you press that pedal down, the more power you get.
Like a sewing machine then.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll give you more power. To be honest with you, even I don't know enough about this. I just get it, I set it so I can weld with it.
Yeah.
If you really get into it, there's so many different variations. The top ones basically are just general welding. If you flick over to what they call HF, full HF welding is for welding aluminium.
Okay.
So if you look at it, see it does that? That's called a pulse wave. So you can set your pulse frequency, your pulse width, pulse flow on your gas, and your AC balance, which is the balance between the top and the bottom of those pulses. That's all for welding aluminium. It is all involved, but you can play around for your steel, so you can get it so you'll start, when you fire it up, when you put your foot on the pedal, it'll either come in gently or it'll weld straight away.
Yeah.
So that's your welding A, which is once it's reached its full potential, that is your level, and then you have a background as well, and then that's your downslope. Say you were welding 1,500 pieces of material exactly the same with a weld that long.
Yeah.
That'll give you a ramp up.
Yeah.
Then you weld. If you set it, I think it's on 40. It doesn't matter how long you got your finger on that. Then you set all of this, and it will just go and stop. Automatically. So it sets it all up for doing constant welding.
Okay.
If you've got to weld 1,000 of those together.
Yeah.
Yeah. But normally I turn it off and just weld it as you want to use it.
Yeah.
It's a lot more complicated than that.
Obviously.
A lot more. So that's your TIG welder.
Sounds like aluminium is the most complicated metal to weld.
Can be. Yeah.
With the most variance, I mean.
Oh god, yeah. Yeah.
When you're welding in here, why do you choose MIG over TIG?
MIG's just easier. You'll get a neater weld with TIG, I'll show you that later.
So you maybe used a TIG on something that's going to be more exposed?
Yeah, definitely. If you want it to look pretty.
Yeah.
You can make that look pretty, but only on larger welds.
Yeah.
If you're doing a small weld, you want to use your TIG. A lot of body people use the TIG welder. It's just what I've been brought up, working in a panel shop, you know, you've got to churn it out.
Yeah.
You tend to use a MIG welder and spend more time grinding down.
Next week on the workshop.
Harley WLA gearbox where the kickstart was slipping. So we now got all our new bits. Slight difference. So now we've got the right sizes. We'll put it all together and see what happens. What say you?
Aye.
Aye.